Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talking Timepieces. Hey, Johnny, how's it going today? Welcome to another episode of Talking Timepieces, where we talk about watch collecting and horology. I just realized this camera's not quite vertical, but what the heck? Working by myself. Hey, Gian. Um, and just wish you all a fantastic Sunday. For some of you, it's evening. For some of you, it's morning. I hope, however, your day worked out. I hope it worked out well. And I hope your evening or afternoon, whatever you have coming, is also wonderful. Everybody saying hi to everybody. Hi, Jean. And wristwatch check, wearing my silver Snoopy. And I had a leather strap I picked up. I wound up not getting a custom strap. I went to my custom friend Sartipi. I've done an episode on him, and I posted some pictures from his shop. But he actually talked me into a plain strap, well, relatively plain. This is cordovan leather. It's a very nice strap. It's very well made, and he his this series of, and it's from his company Sartipi. See, it says Sartipi on the inside, um, and it's cordovan leather. It's lined very nicely. It lets you see the back of the watch, and it works with the deployant clasp, my Omega deployant clasp that I had with my old Speedmaster. So now I've got factory metal on the Speedy, and I do think that the plain, just clean, good quality leather strap, slightly lighter blue stitching, brings it out and just makes it a nice wear. I am glad that I have the metal strap and, of course, the sailcloth strap that it came on. And so now I have all of the straps that I could potentially want to wear with the piece for now and the foreseeable future. Hey, Warren. How's it going, Warren? And Smack Daddy. Nice. Hey, from Australia. Always nice to hear from you, Smack Daddy. And hello, greetings from here in Wiesbaden, Germany. Uh, the strap looks great. I'm really, really pleased with how that came out. I really, really am pleased with how it came out. Alex, didn't you have a high beat Navy or other aviation pocket watch? Oh, yes, I have. Talking about beat rates, I should definitely mention the jitterbug I have. This is an Elgin. This is an Elgin jitterbug 10-second stopwatch, and I guess you can't. Well, maybe you can. It beats at 40 times a second, and you just see how smooth the sweep is on that. This watch was made for aviation crews, navigators and bombers and pilots and the like for World War II, because things happen really fast in the air, and a 60-second stopwatch isn't as useful. And then this watch wound up in the hands of a horse breeder who used it to time the horses. And it then wound up in the hands of a collector who was a friend of mine who wound up gifting me the piece. So I'm a very lucky man to get my hands on a watch with such an interesting heritage. But that watch, pocket watch, or well, I should say stopwatch, uh, beats at 40 beats per second, which is very high for a mechanical movement. So I got a couple of comments. We'll check them out, and then let's launch into the topic of the show, or the first topic of the show. We'll talk about other things as we go along. HRM. Hey, HRM. Most brands found out in the 60s that 36,000 per hour beat rate achieved the best accuracy per square millimeter. I wish there were modern chronometer competitions. Well, Laterer still sells observatory qualified pieces, and I think a couple. Well, if you look at Kosk, that's not an observatory, but it is certified. And if you look at Metas, that's the same thing. Although that's not a competition, you could be better than +5, like Rolex is plus or -2. And the new high accuracy speed master they released, and that technology, the bendable uh, hairspring, glass hairspring, silicon hairspring, they're getting within, I think, +2 a day, but there aren't any more competitions. And 8 beats a second, or 4 hertz, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. 8 beats a second is considered pretty much a good rule of thumb. Although, when you get to higher levels of precision, you can get as low as some of these movements that are running 3 hertz, 5 hertz movements. Because, well, number one, if you have a very slow beat rate, something that Bill Sanders likes, for example, over at Watch Art Sci, um, it allows you to use a really big balance wheel, a slow beat rate. The higher your beat rate, the better off it is to use a smaller balance wheel, and some people like to see that big balance wheel banging away. But that's a little bit different, 8 beats is very good today with the precision involved in modern, mechanical systems. In the old-timey days, people would set their watch every day or every other day because they would drift a significant amount, 20, 30 seconds a day by even a good watch. But essentially, the whole concept behind, the splitting of the second, it still applies in today's life, because we started out with, mechanical watches that were beating at a 3 to 8 to 10, let's say, a high beat. For example, the Zenith El Primero Chronomaster. The Zenith El Primero movement is a 5 hertz, 10 beats per second movement. And one of the interesting aspects of a 10 beat movement is it's not just about the accuracy, it's also then about the precision. Because if you have a stopwatch that beats at 10 times a second, you can do tenths of a second um, pretty precisely. The watch may not be completely accurate, but you're always going to get a precise tenth of a second, because the watch beats at 10 times per second. So every tick of the watch is a beat of the balance wheel. It's not trying to, interpolate with the markings or with the gearing or whatever. So, and accuracy and precision are two different things, right? Accuracy is how close you are to the center of the target. Precision is how tight your shot group is. So let's see. Oh, Johnny, I'm glad you think. Well, I would. Number one, it's a really nice gift from a really nice friend, and it's a very interesting, high quality piece with a lot of really interesting history. This Elgin. Um, Eric, hey, how's it going, Eric? Kevin, how's it going, Kevin from Florida? Greetings from Wiesbaden, Germany. And so, mechanical movements have been able to get to relatively high beat rates, like the 40 beats a second on the Elgin here, the 20 hertz movement that we have here. This beats quite fast. And as I was showing, in case you came in a little bit late, let's do it again for the crowd. Look how smooth. And since it is a 10-second stopwatch, how fast that sweep is, you know, this is and considering it beats at such a high rate, this is an incredibly accurate mechanical timing device, because it is a 40 beats per second. It's very um, tight in its operation, as it were, because part of the aspects of the number of beats per second is, there are two aspects to it. One is the beat may be irregular. Maybe the beat is a little bit longer or a little bit shorter because of the temperature of the watch, or the tension in the spring. Maybe it is not a constant force mechanism, which most aren't, and maybe it's not wound up completely. So the beat is a little bit slower as the amplitude goes down in the watch, because the spring is unwinding. That's one aspect of it. Another is, what if it just skips a beat? Watches can skip a beat. So the more beats per second, the less chance of an irregular beat affecting the watch, or a missed beat affecting the watch. Now, let's go up a level, right? And let's talk about the next level up. And the next level up was the Bulova Acutron, which beat, I think my batteries are starting to go down. Um, because it's every time I come across it, and I haven't worn it a lot lately, so it's just been sitting there and it stops. So I'm thinking it might be battery, because then it runs and then it stops, and then since it sits there, it accumulates what little power it has, and then it runs for a little bit more. So I guess I have to have a watchmaker look at it. Trouble is with the Accutron, you have to have the right battery or it doesn't run well, because it was designed at a time when batteries didn't put out as much, the voltages weren't as high in those old batteries. In a modern battery, the voltages are higher and it can make the watch run faster inaccurately then. But the Accutron beat at 360 beats per second, and variations beat higher or lower. The 300, the Speed Sonic, I believe, was at 300 hertz, but they were all within that 300 to 400 hertz range with the tuning fork movement, and that was obviously uh, two orders of magnitude more precise than an 8-beat mechanical uh, movement, and that incredibly fine splitting of the hair, as it were. I mean, just look at how smooth the sweep is on this Accutron, right? And that's because in the case of the Accutron, there was a direct mechanical connection between the tuning fork and the gear that drove the mechanism of the watch, actually. So the Accutron was also an electromechanical watch in that sense. Like, I guess you could say the spring drive or the oyster quartz, that and the electronic component drove a mechanical component that told the time. Interesting way to look at it. Hey, Watch Chris, my friend, how's it going? We gotta. Oh, you owe me a visit to Wiesbaden, because I was in. Oh no, actually, I don't. You were in Wiesbaden, but you were there for a very short period of time. You got to come out in the daytime. We got to have a beer in the sunshine. But I'll come out to Frankfurt, sure. Smack Daddy, hey Smack Daddy. I don't know much about beat rate, but I did think the higher the rate, the more accurate. Tends to be, because there's you're slicing the sandwich meat a little, thinner. You can get away with a little bit. It gives you a more precise cut, as it were. Um, HRM. I used to own a Seiko 89 ST stopwatch, 360,000 beat rate, 1/100th stopwatch made for the Olympics. Right, but that was probably an electronic. Um, the Bulova high beat, again, Bulova, right? You think about it, Bulova's got high beat in its blood, although this was after they were purchased by Citizen. So this is actually a Citizen high beat quartz. It's 262 kilohertz. And this one is the Lunar Pilot with the meteor dial. I really like this piece. There are other pieces with the meteorite dial, but since the Lunar Pilot is a legitimate space watch homage from the company that made it, and it has a meteorite dial, it, in my mind, makes up for the fact that it's got a quartz. I guess it's one of the few quartzes I have in my collection, but it's totally worth having in your collection. And of course, basic quartz, you should always have a G-Shock in your collection. Always have a G-Shock in your collection. And you can tell the battery's dead on this as well. But you can tell how much I really pay attention to my quartz pieces. But still, a standard quartz beats at around 33,000, and then a high beat is 262, and then some of the specialized ones like that Seiko beat at higher beat rates, 360, and now 40, and then 10, down to, I believe, the Speedmaster, I think, is 6 or something along, 3.5, I meant, not 6, but 6 beats or so, 5.5, something along those lines per second. But it goes beyond that, because, of course, once you go past quartz watches and running at several 100,000 beats per second, you then take the leap and you go to atomic clocks. For example, you could buy a rubidium atomic clock smaller than this stack of business cards, and you can buy a cesium atomic clock for slightly larger than this stack of business cards. And atomic clocks, they beat at the millions of times per second, splitting the second into even finer and finer slices to the point where the most advanced atomic clocks, if they had started the clock at the beginning of the universe, it would not have lost a second yet. That's accuracy. And part of that accuracy is number one, the stability, but number two, the number of slices that you're slicing that second into. Let's see. Ooh, we got some comments scrolling. Got to scroll back up. I always love that. Nanad. Hey, Nanad. I've heard that especially Zenith with its movement is more complicated to service and I assume more expensive. Well, expense is relative, right? Because I'll tell you right now, uh, this three-hander Rolex costs more to service than this Zenith Chronomaster, but that's because you got to pay to get Rolexes serviced. Um, Part of the cost of repair is the expense of the labor and the cost of the parts, and some of the cost of repair is who you're having repaired, what you're having repaired. But yes, the older El Primero movements uh, did have a reputation of requiring service more often because of the high beat. But since they've gone to a silicon escapement, I haven't heard too many people talk about that, because the silicon parts on silicon parts don't require lubrication and or minimal in the case of the silicon on metal. And they're amagnetic as well, and also they're relatively light. I mean, even at that size, inertia matters, and the silicon parts are inherently lighter than the steel parts that they're replacing. Maybe not by a lot, but yeah, inertia is inertia. And but a modern El Primero, I would trust as far as maintenance, and an older one I would trust too. I would just keep a time grapher and keep an eye on that amplitude and the beat error and the like. And when they start to drift, take it to a shop. Um, Jason, more wear and tear. Yeah, as I was addressing, the all steel had higher levels of wear, but not significantly higher levels of wear. But then again, 20% more wear is a day out of 5, right? Um, but the silicon escapements in all of the companies watches. In fact, one of the problems I've heard about the Omega coaxial, which it's not inherently due to the silicon parts, but it's because of the nature of the movement, is that when they go beyond the to the point where you need to replace parts because they run the nature of the movement is it runs so well, even when it's running badly, eating itself up as it were, grinding parts and that need replacement, then it's still running well enough that you don't realize that it's in bad shape. That's why you should have a time grapher. Then you can see differences in the little things of the amplitude and the beat error and the beat rate so that you can diagnose the watch sooner and bring it in for maintenance when it shows any sign of running oddly, and that'll save you for a lot of things. But yeah, the high beat and Seiko's got a couple of high beat mechanicals out now, 10 beat 5 hertz as well. A gentleman whose name I can't read because it's the characters. What is your, or it could be a lady, pardon me, but a gentleman, whoever's out there. What's your opinion about 3-axis tourbillons? Well, 3-axis tourbillons would theoretically be among the most stable and accurate, especially if they're high beat 3-dimensional tourbillons, because the tourbillon was developed to compensate for gravity in a pocket watch, which was mostly held vertically, whereas it's not as important in a wristwatch that moves around a lot. But a 3-axis tourbillon, since it's moving on all 3 axes, would then compensate for even any irregularities with your arm motion. So theoretically, a 3-axis tourbillon would be more accurate. I just think they're cool horology, frankly. So they are theoretically more accurate because of their inherent design, and they're an extremely awesome to look at, both stationary and in motion, expression of horological design and execution. So yeah, 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 3-dimensional tourbillons. I couldn't afford any of them, but what the heck. Johnny, another treasure is a maritime watch, very precise, Remember, Hamilton did some until the 50s. Afterwards, GPS did the job. Exactly. Although most ships have a backup clock somewhere. Um, but the occasionally I come across some ships' clocks. Unfortunately, most of them are more modern units that are quartz based. But even those are very well made. They're in the box. They've got the gimbals so that they don't, they don't wobble around a lot. Um, they're high accuracy pieces, very well made. But yeah, a ship's clock is always a nice thing to add to your collection. I don't have a lot of room for stuff, uh, but if I had, I would definitely look for a ship's clock to put in that slot. I do have a dashboard clock from a MiG 21, although it's not the same. Different. Oh, Gian, what's my say about Alpina and Raymond Weil? Well, Alpina makes some very good pieces. Alpina, I would call Alpina um, somewhere between Zinn and IWC. I would say that Alpina's pieces, um, well, although Alpina, I would say Alpina goes a little bit higher. Although their mainstream pieces are about the same, I would say, as Zinn, maybe a little bit better. Well, they a little bit fancier execution, let's put it that way. Alpinas do have a little bit of a little flashier, in my opinion. The case finishing is a little bit more impressive. I wouldn't say it's better, but Alpinas are very striking pieces, whereas Zinn has an aura of competence. But Alpinas are really nice. I had an Alpina uh, regulator I gave to my cousin, and he still wears it. He loves it. Alpina makes some really nice watches. They really do. And when you think about Raymond Weil was starting to drift into obscurity, and they really, really made people recognize them again with that the award-winning sector dial piece that I think it was last year. They won in the challenge category. I believe it was the challenge category, but they won the Swiss Horological Society Award for their sector dial piece, which was based on an ETA movement, but it was such a nice execution and it was a decent price. They might have been throwing Raymond Weil a bone, as there were some other watches you could argue could have fit, won that category, but that Raymond Weil watch is a nice piece, and they are a good company, and I guess they deserve a second look. Cutting back on my alcohol. Ever since I got this smart ring, and that's one of the things I've been telling people is a smart ring is a great buy because if you get a smart ring, you can wear whatever watch you want, and you can still track your steps and your heart rate and your sleep and all. And that's when I realized that my heart rate was a little too high, and it'd be a pain in the butt to die when the heart breaks and everything else is in still halfway decent running order. I want it all to age at the same rate, so I've cut back on my alcohol and I'm walking more because I'm tracking it. So if you're a anti-smartwatch person because you wear a real watch, go out and get yourself a smart ring, and then you'll be happy to be miserable about your step count. Oh, um, HRM. No, the Seiko is a 360,000. I think maybe 360. 300 and you could is that a decimal point or a comma? Is it 360 beats? I can believe 360 beats on a mechanical piece. That's not I mean, it's a horological achievement, but it's not, breaking the laws of physics. Um, I believe, yeah, I think it's 360.000. My apologies for interpreting it as 360,000. But yeah, mechanical, I could easily see at 360. That means it's really, really accurate. But then again, Olympics. Gian, oh yes, I read that one already. Sequality. Hey, Sequality. Nice to see you on the show. Just picked up a Tudor Pelagos LHD. I have always liked the Pelagos. I've always liked the Pelagos. If I hadn't had a love affair with Seamasters until I got my sub, I would have probably flirted with the Pelagos because they're nice pieces. They really are. And the LHD, I like that one. The only niggle I would have with that is it's got the closed lugs. You can only use NATO style straps, but you could probably get a nice leather NATO to run with it, you know? Maybe you can get a continuous Milanese. That would be fun. Got a thin, flexible Milanese and slide that through the lugs. The thing is so accurate, picked it up for less than 2 wow, goodbye, without bracelet and box. Came with the rubber, but man, I'm loving it. Well, it's a good watch. It really is a good watch, and Tudor makes good watches, and their new in-house movements are good movements, you know? They're owned by Rolex, and they are fulfilling everything that Hans Wilsdorf wanted for the company, to offer people that level of quality at a reasonable price, and now that Rolex has gone luxury, thank goodness we have Tudor, so there still is a reasonably priced sports watch brand out there that has that level of, cachet that Rolex has. Gian, "Nah, I don't want a G-Shock in all honesty, thanks for the advice, though." Well, the reason you should have a G-Shock, if you notice, like I said, I didn't even replace the battery lately, but if I, uh go to, say, for example, a Rock on Ring concert or some open air rock concert where I might get drunk and fall down and have somebody step on my wrist, worst case scenario, obviously, wear the G-Shock, or maybe you're not thinking and you smack it into something, you go bang and you whack it into a pole or you break, better to have the G-Shock for situations where you don't want to wear anything else. In situations where like, for example, I'm going to go to the Springsteen concert in a couple of weeks. I'm going to wear my Nomos because I want to wear a nice watch, but I don't necessarily want to, yeah, bang it into something accidentally or, be worried about somebody seeing it in the crowd and trying to steal it. Where Nomos is a fantastic piece, but not enough people know that it's a fantastic piece to wanna steal it from you. Um, but yeah, a G-Shock is worth having, or if you don't like the plasticness of the G-Shock, get yourself a Victorinox Inox, the INOX. That is also an indestructible piece, and it looks cool, and it's a Swiss steel case. I think they make it in other case materials, but steel case, sports watch, and they make a diver version, and they make a mechanical version. But if you want indestructible, get the Quartz Inox. It looks gorgeous, and I think you can get it for under $500 or around that price point, and it's really indestructible and it's beautiful. Uh, Tanya, hey Tanya, nice to see you. I'm thinking of getting the Whoop band. My man has the Aura ring. Well, I depends on what phone you have because I have a Samsung. I have the Z Fold. And so I got the Samsung Ring, doesn't require a subscription. But yeah, I mean, a band is also not a watch, like a Fitbit band, or there are other companies like the Whoop, get a band, but just you don't necessarily need a smartwatch, which is actually not a smartwatch. It's a smart wearable device that has timekeeping as a secondary functionality. Dr. Bob, 36 an hour is 10 hertz, high beat. Yes, sir. Um, What fell? Oh, my phone fell off of where I put it. That's okay. Yes, 10 hertz is about the fastest you're gonna see in a mechanical piece, like, as I was saying earlier, like the El Primero. And also, Seiko just released a mechanical. They've always had in the Grand Seiko lineup, I believe they've always had at least one 10 hertz, 5 hertz, yeah, 5 hertz, 10 beat mechanical, piece, and they've got some really, really nice ones, in fact. Other than Seiko and Zenith, there are a couple of companies that I think make them, but not too many. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Obviously, someone will tell me if I am incorrect. Oh, Gian, apart from Zinn, what other German brand watches would rival, close, or equal to Zinn? Well, there are quite a few that are better than Zinn in some ways. Like if you look at someone like Dornbluth or Lange, I would say that Nomos is better than Zinn. Um, Nomos is also has in-house movements, and they're very high level of finishing, and they're really beautiful pieces. And yeah, they really are. Look at that movement, and that's an in-house. That's a Deutsche Uhrenwerk movement. But A lot of the look into Glashütte. There are like 16 different watch companies in Glashütte, and there are several in Dresden, and there are a few in there's Zinn in Frankfurt, and Stova is in the area as well, and Stova makes some beautiful pieces, really beautiful pieces. And, if you like the Daniel Wellington kind of Bauhaus look and you don't wanna buy an arguably quality challenged watch, you could get Stova makes some really nice pieces that have that clean Bauhaus look. So does Zinn. And Stova, I would say, is about as roughly the same quality as Zinn. A lot of those, German Flieger companies. Zinn is a very good company. They're not a magic company. There are some companies out there that, like I said, like Dornbluth, that rival some of the best Swiss companies, if not beat it at their higher end pieces. Lange, Lange and Son, Söhne, I would say they're better than Patek. Some of the German companies make some really good watches, especially the ones out of the Glashütte area. But I'm not going to turn my nose up at companies like Dornbluth who aren't, or Zinn, or some of the other Stova. You know, the Inox, Johnny says, also comes in titanium. Very, very cool. The LHD has the crown on the left-hand side. I believe that was because they didn't want it to be digging into their hands when they were flexing aggressively or something like that. A couple of other companies do that too, military style and diver style watches, so that the crown's not sticking up to poke into you. Gian made you laugh with the worst case. I'm glad I made you laugh. I want the show to be entertaining as well as informative, and maybe a little bit of interesting and exciting. Well, I don't know about the exciting part, but at least interesting. Tanya saying enjoy. I'm assuming she means about the upcoming Springsteen concert, which I'm looking very much forward to seeing. And the tickets weren't even comically expensive. I mean, they were expensive, but I paid like, I think 170 each or something, which isn't too terrible. And it's on the floor, so that you got to, it's standing, but at least it's not in the nosebleed or behind the stage or something like that. Let's see. I mentioned that they have titanium inoxes. The Pixel 9a on you, Tanya. Well, then I would look into the Seiko ring. I mean Seiko. I would look into the Samsung ring, because you can now pick. I mean, I picked mine up at the local electronics store. They had a whole line of plastic ones so you could fit, to make sure they fit, and then boom, I walked out with it. So I would look into the Samsung ring, and the Pixel is Google, so you should be able to run the Samsung software on it, or at least there are almost certainly other health programs that are compatible with it. I would at least take a look, because one of the bad things is a humongous corporation, but they're all humongous corporations stealing your data nowadays. So go with the ones that at least give you the best service. Oh, see quality at G, and probably Nomos. Yep, just mentioned Nomos. I love Nomos. Own one. Dr. Bob, 5 hertz, not 10 was a typo. Yeah, 5 hertz is 10 beats. I knew what you meant. Gian, see quality. Whoa, you got that right. Okay, yes. Gian, I own a Zinn 556. Nice watch. And it's amazing quality, but Nomos is a great brand, as well as Junghans. Junghans is also a good brand. I used to have a Junghans, and I sold it, but the guy who I sold it to really likes it. But I've had a few Junghans. I actually do miss. I had the original 1972 Alarm Olympics piece, the orange and blue one, and I sold it. I regret selling that. I wish I had that. I mean, I wouldn't wear it a lot, but I would have it in the collection because it wasn't that expensive a piece, and it has a little bit of a history there with the Olympics tie-in and all. And Junghans makes some nice watches. Let's see. Smack Daddy didn't know Nomos was German. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. C Quality. Laco has also some interesting pieces. Yes, and that's another great German company. Laco makes some really nice pieces, and they've got some beautiful pieces that have the old movement, which was made for pocket watches and is now being used by a lot of people. Dornbluth's got it. Unitas, the Unitas movement. They've got a couple of really nice pieces with that in it. Looks really beautiful with the subdial, small seconds. Um, Johnny, Tag Heuer also did some high-speed chronos. Don't know if the watch itself was high beat. Well, actually, I think I know which one you meant. They had a couple of really high-end, high beat. I saw those. Um, but those were some of their luxury pieces. But I know which ones you're talking about. But I don't think it had any. I don't think they had any knocking around 5 hertz watches like Seiko and Zenith do. But as soon as they make a small enough atomic clock, I'm going to start selling atomic pocket watches. Let me know if you're interested. Uh, but yeah, one day we're going to have atomic pocket watches. But then again, a cell phone is the closest thing to that because it hooks directly into the GPS system, which is based on atomic clocks. A GPS satellite is just an atomic clock and a radio, you know, beaming the news to the ground. The time, I mean, and then the computer on the ground then does the Doppler Einstein stuff to figure out where you are. But a GPS satellite is just a clock and a radio, which is why time is now a commodity beamed for free out of outer space, as it were. You know, this is the first time in society where time is literally a global commodity. That all you need is a radio, and you can have perfect time everywhere. Interesting. Tanya, interesting. I'll check into it. Worth a look. You can always change your mind. Gian, the more I get into Swiss watches, the more I'm gearing towards German watches instead because of the QC. Nothing wrong with that. Definitely look into some of these pieces. I love my Nomos. I originally was thinking a little on the plain side, and I kept thinking of selling it. But every time I wore it, I fell a little bit more in love with it. And now I don't wear it a lot, but I'm glad I own it, and I do wear it often enough that I'm glad I have it in my collection. Like I said, I'm going to wear it to the Springsteen concert. Le Bull Le Doge. What's my opinion on rat pee? Is that a euphemism for a watch? I know that there's a disease that it's a parasite that makes mice like cat pee, so they get eaten to infect the cat, but I don't think that's what you're talking about. See quality at Gian. German quality is awesome. They really have passion for what they do. This is true. Glashütte Original, they're a great alternative to Lange because they're expensive, but they're not comically expensive. The CQ, which a lot of people consider is better than the sub, is about 12, 13, in base, in steel. And their dress pieces are gorgeous. And their I I think they could get away with a bigger moon phase, but I like the way they execute their watches. Glashütte Original. Hey, Carter, how's it going, my friend? Smack Daddy, am I fluent in German? Mein Witz ist, für eine Ausländer, der Deutsch spricht, mein Deutsch ist ziemlich gut. Aber für einen Amerikaner, der Deutsch spricht, mein Deutsch ist hervorragend. And that's in German. I said, for a foreigner that speaks German, my German is pretty good. But for an American that speaks German, my German is excellent. Aber ja, ich kann ziemlich gut Deutsch sprechen, wenn ich sagen darf. Aber ich lebe hier hin und her seit 81. Insgesamt über 25 Jahren, fast 30 Jahren in Deutschland. So yeah, my German's decent. I'll say that. Gian, what's an atomic watch again? Well, currently there are no atomic watches, but there are atomic clocks. You could get an atomic desk clock made if you wanted, because the chips for atomic clocks are getting small enough for that. Well, that might be a business idea, but I don't know if the demand would be high enough for the effort to. But that'd be a one-off science project. Buy an atomic clock, a rubidium chip scale from like Microchip. They cost a few $100. The accessory electronics would be another few $100 case. So you could probably build yourself an atomic clock for under $2,000 desktop. It's like building a timer server card. But an atomic clock uses the vibrations of atoms to determine the time, and they split of course, since we're talking about millions of vibrations a second, they split the second quite nicely. And as I was saying earlier in the show, some of the most accurate atomic clocks, if you had started them when the universe began, they wouldn't have lost a second yet. So they're very accurate. But even old school atomic clocks are very, 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 very accurate. And chip scale atomic clock, they call it chip scale, but yeah, they're about yay big currently. And that doesn't count all the stuff that you have to put around them, the circuit board and power supply and display and all of that other. So we're still talking, you could probably build, a desktop atomic clock with a real atomic clock chip inside for, like I said, maybe 2 to 3,000 bucks, and it would be half a foot on a side. But it's getting smaller, and one day that smartwatch will have some kind of rubidium clock chip in its inside or something crazy like that. You never know. Frenetic 1, hey, how's it going? Or Frenetic 11, sorry. The Casio's multi-band G-Shocks connect to atomic watches. Yeah, they connect to the GPS. And this one, for example, this one also connects via Bluetooth. So it can connect via any, Bluetooth or GPS. And when the battery's in it, well, the battery's in it, but it's dead. You can tell I don't wear this one very often. But yeah, this will sync from the GPS or it'll sync from Bluetooth. Which is another good reason to have, and it's solar. So get yourself a solar atomic GPS watch, and you'll always have one for the zombie apocalypse because then you don't have to be rooting through drugstores for extra batteries. Although this should, oh no, that's true. If this is solar, it's not that the battery's dead. I just need to make sure that it's put it in the sunlight for a while. Sometimes I need to think with the head part. So, Sheehan's awesome German. Schmetterling, Krankenhaus, butterfly, hospital. Okay. Dr. Bob's nightmare. Smack Daddy, that's very talented. Well, thank you, but I mean, I'm a lucky man. I came here to Germany in the early 80s as a Cold War soldier, signals intelligence, electronic warfare. And I stayed. Was a traveling salesman to the PX system for over a decade. And after the Cold War ended, I tried for another 8 years or so to stay as a businessman. And I went back to the States in 97 and developed a second career as a journalist and came back once I could and been back ever since 2014. So, but the German comes from just talking to people. If you came here or actually pick a country, spend enough time on the streets, you'll wind up speaking that language. But thank you for the compliment. Carter, I live in the Netherlands, and that was very good German. Oh, thanks. Carter, if you live in the Netherlands, maybe we can meet up in, I don't know, Venlo or Amsterdam or, any of those places up there. It's not that big a country. We could find some place to meet and have a beer. Gian, by the way, I saw some watches like Vario made in Singapore, and Baltony is like China. Are they good? Baltony, I believe, is French. No, Baltic is French. Baltony, I believe, yeah, could be Chinese, but they're a good micro brand. Vario and Baltony both make good watches, and they're reasonably priced. Definitely worth looking into. Both of those companies, Vario and Baltony. Hey, we got 15 minutes left to the top of the hour. Just checking in. Libole Doge. I'm having bed bug soup. What's for dinner? Did you know that bed bugs, the male actually pierces the female with an ovipositor kind of thing to impregnate her because they don't have, the tunnel mechanism? If you want some interesting bed bug trivia. But yeah, when you think about beat rates, you can also think about aspects like the chronograph and how popular the stopwatch aspect is because you see a lot of watches that have no date. People go, well, there's no date. But a lot of chronos don't have a date. And nobody complains about that, do they? Or I should say very few. I don't hear people I don't hear people complaining too much about chronos with no date. The JLC Polaris, I used to have the three-hander no date, and people are like, "Oh, no date," but the chrono doesn't have a date, and nobody complains about that. So I think the aspect of being a chrono is just such a cool aspect that a lot of people, you know, don't think about it. The chrono is the complication, as it were, and the chronograph is one of the most popular complications in the watch industry. And when you and actually, chronographs are really hard to make. It basically the competition that forces these companies to make the chronographs, and they're very popular complications. But chronographs are actually, hard to make, and especially when you start talking about things like rattrapants, which are double chronographs, or flybacks. Actually, I do have a flyback. I should have pulled it forward, but it's an old Walkman flyback, but still flyback. And so that aspect of the chronograph, that aspect of being able to measure time, the stopwatch, and for those of you who missed it, I don't know if you can hear the maybe if I do some put it up against the metal, who knows? But if you look at the sweep, look how beautiful that sweep. And this beats at 40, this has 40 beats a second. It's a 20 hertz piece. The Elgin Jitterbug, it was used by air crews in World War II because you don't need a 60-second stopwatch. Things happen real fast in the air. And a good example of high beat accuracy, because if you think about it, a 10-second stopwatch beating at 40 times a second is going to be pretty accurate. Yeah, it's going to be pretty accurate. If the beats are irregular because of temperature, or if it skips a beat, 40 beats a second gives you a little bit nicer cushion, as it were. And that means the Acutron would only be an order of magnitude more accurate, and a base quartz would only be 3 times more, 3 orders of magnitude more accurate. So, once you start talking about some of those high beat mechanicals like that Seiko 360, that's fast. That's fast and accurate. Oh, so yeah, like I said, we're getting to the close. Let's finish up these questions and call it a day until next week. And as I was saying, I'm getting back on top. I shouldn't say back. I'm getting on top of the new job. I'm feeling more comfortable, and I'll have more time on my hands. I shouldn't say more time on my hands. I'll have more stress-free time on my hands, because sometimes I had the time and I just didn't have the focus to do an episode. But we'll do a review piece on the Speedy, the Silver Snoopy, this week, and I don't think I've done a close up of a couple of the pieces that I have. I know the Longines calendar. I haven't done a close up, and I might do a re-review of some of the older watches I have, especially the ones I've owned for a couple of years, and do it's been a few years. What do I think about the watch now? So we'll throw some new episodes up, and I'm warming up to the idea of maybe doing some commentary pieces without the hands on, and that would also help me increase my frequency, because right now I don't have too many pieces on hand that I haven't done episodes on. My friend Gate let me borrow his Vacheron vintage, and I've got this and a couple of other pieces. So, but we should see some commentary. If you want that kind of stuff, let me know what watches you'd like me to comment on, and I'll go pull up their images from the website and look up some of their specs, and we'll do some hands-off reviews of some of these pieces. Let me know. What is Gian saying? Gian, I'm more looking at vintage watches. Thus, I went looking and found Vario in particular, kind of like Hamilton, but better vintage looks. And the Vario, I would say, is almost as well made as the Hamilton. I still think the Hamilton is a better made than the Vario, but the Vario is not badly made. I would put Vario on par with like some of the base Seikos and things of that nature. But they're good pieces, just like base Seikos. But yeah, Varios are totally worth looking into. And the companies like Baltony, Vario, Baltic are making some very nice vintage inspired pieces that are worth looking into. Gian, I don't like chronographs with a date. I can go either way as long as the date's presented well. Zenith has a triple date moon phase calendar that I really, really like, but I have an El Primero and I have the Longines triple date moon phase, the Conquest. And if I sold both, I could swing the Zenith moon phase calendar, but since I have the two separate, I like having them separate because I do like the chrono only open heart El Primero. I do think it's a beautiful piece. And if it had a date, I think it would make the face too busy. It's almost too busy as it is, but I think it's a beautiful piece. Thanks for the info, Johnny, on the bulldog there. Frenetic 11. I think multiband is a radio frequency to some atomic watches distributed in the world that makes them keep atomic wide time. Close to me is in US Colorado. My Cassie Oak is GPS able. Everything is GPS able today. Those old Naval Observatory broadcasts, they're still doing them, but nobody uses them anymore. Everyone is tied into GPS now. Everybody. Even server farms have antennas now to pick up GPS. GPS has become the de facto timestamp for the planet. But yeah, and GPS is easy to intercept. I mean, not easy, but with modern tech, it's easy. And nowadays, a radio controlled clock, there are still some that tie into the old radio frequencies, but almost everything new, especially smartwatches, tie into GPS. Gian, Miota only has like 2,100 beats, but they're very accurate. Well, again, like I was saying, with a modern piece, the precision is so high, you don't worry as much about missed beats or irregular beats. So, you keep that Miota wound, it's gonna run well and it's gonna run reasonably accurately. It's not gonna be Kosk, but well, it might be. You can adjust you can adjust that movement. You can regulate it to Kosk. Um, they don't normally. Well, you can get Kosk from Miotas, but a slow beat, a 3 hertz, a 5.5 beat, 2.5 hertz. There are pieces out there that do that, but now the precision is high enough that you can get away with a lower beat and still maintain accuracy because the mechanism is so precise. There's less worry about irregular beats or missed beats. Gian, one last question. And yeah, let's make it the last question for the evening. Does having a watch where the hands jump after setting up time an indication of something wrong with it? My Hydro Conquest sometimes jumps hands when I set it. That's more, it could be that you just picked it up and it's cold and it's warming up and the hands are, maybe the gears aren't meshing as well as they could be. Sometimes it could just be lag in the gearing because if you do turn the gears in certain directions, that little bit of space between all of the teeth adds up through the chain to be like a millimeter of waggle in the hand. And one of the ways you can adjust for that is wind it back and wind it forward so that way you're engaging the gears and you're moving the hand, and then you just wind it forward until it gets where you want and stop. Don't overshoot and pull back or anything like that. Some watches work better if you go backwards to where it is so the gears are pushing, but basically if you set it by rolling the gears at least through the hour, then you know that the gear train is meshed up and it will jump less, if at all, at that point. You know, take up the space in the gear lash, as it were. Hysteresis is the fancy word for it. Gee, and I see. Thanks. That's what I always do. Wind it forward, then backward again. Try it the other way. Wind it backward, then forward again, and see if that helps. But roll it through at least 20 minutes, half an hour, when you turn it, so that you make sure that the gears are engaged completely. Hey, Milad, you have a good evening as well. Dr. Bob's, after I adjust the hands forward, turn back the crown half a degree and it should stop the hand jump. Works on all my Seikos. Hey, not a bad tip. Gee, and glad that it's okay for the Hydro Conquest then. Well, yeah, there will be some gear lash, and maybe over time the pin, the winding pin could get a little bit worn and there's a little bit of a flop in there. Or it could just be that there's just that, like I said, that little bit of gap in all the gears can adds up to some serious distance, but there's nothing inherently wrong with the watch. You just have to, if it gets out of hand, you should definitely have it looked at. Maybe the gears are wearing, and that's causing excessive gear lash. But yeah, definitely make sure the gears are engaged when you're setting, and there'll be less hand movement. And like I said, try it in the other direction this time. Wind it backwards and then forwards again. So, on that note, everybody have a fantastic evening. Have a great week, and we'll talk next Sunday. Oh, and Eric saying how his spirit Zulu time. Sheehan, thanks for the time. Take care and enjoy the week. And I hope you all enjoy the week. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.